I'd like to reconvene the Senate Appropriations Committee for our afternoon hearing with our state-related higher education institutions. With us today is the president of Penn State University, the chancellor of University of Pittsburgh, the president of Temple University, and the acting president of Lincoln University. Before I begin, could I please ask all of you to stand and be sworn, please? You swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please affirm by saying yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. To remind the members, we will allow the standing committee chairs to ask questions and comments, and then turn it over to the members, each having 5 minutes. If we have some time at the end, we can turn for a second round. If our standing committee, given our numbers here, if our standing committee chairs could limit their comments and questions to 10 minutes, that would be great. First is our standing committee chair of education, Senator Smucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Just start by saying first that we're always very fortunate in Pennsylvania to have what is recognized as one of the best systems of higher education in the country, and your institutions are obviously a very, very important part of that. So we appreciate the partnership that we have with all of your institutions from the state. Could you just provide for the committee a little background for each of your institutions? What percentage of your funding comes from the state?
So at the University of Pittsburgh, state funding now accounts for about 6.6% of our total expenditures.
Very similar percentage.
11 at Temple.
And at Lincoln, 23%.
Thank you. And I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at the governor's proposal, and as a part of that proposal, he's asked for some restrictions on tuition, on raising tuition, and I'd just like to get your reaction to that. What are your expectations? What are your plans for tuition increases, and how would that be impacted were that budget to pass?
So I think that my expectations are always to have the tuition increases as low as possible, and I was very pleased to see the governor's budget draft. And in fact, it was consistent with our initial request to the Commonwealth, which was that these types of increases would allow us to keep tuition increases below inflation, and that would be our goal going in.
So Penn State has actively been working on an access and affordability initiative with a group of programs, and part of that is control on tuition, where we've taken 8 Commonwealth campuses already. I've proposed to the board to go to 0, another 6 to go to 1.8, and to have the highest at Penn State University for any campus to be 2.99. If the governor's request were to become reality, Penn State University, I would recommend to the board that all campuses have no increase for in-state students.
Affordability is clearly a partnership between the university and the state. If the amount of funding that is mentioned in the governor's proposal were to be forthcoming, I would see no issue in tuition being cost of living or less.
Even prior to the governor's announcement, as part of Lincoln's effort to keep tuition affordable and to limit student debt, our Board of Trustees voted in February of 2014 for a tuition freeze, so that students who began at Lincoln in the fall of 2014, when they come back this fall, will pay no more than they paid then. In addition, the freshmen who come in the fall of 2015 will only experience a modest increase of 2.5%.
Thank you. In the previous hearing this morning, heard from Thaddeus Stevens, School of Technology, and they talked about the need for trades and skills, career training, that is a little different space to fill than what perhaps is you see at your universities. But I'm particularly interested for Dr. Barron. I know Penn School of Technology has at least a similar model, and there was some discussion around the total cost to educate a student in that setting, and I'm curious what the total cost is at Penn School of Technology, if you have that information.
Okay, so I'll ask somebody who is in the back to look up exactly what that tuition cost is for this. About 5,000 students at that campus, and
Sure,
as
if you could just
say-
provide that at some point in the future. But I do want to give an opportunity for each of you to talk about what, I think, as I said earlier, we have a great system of higher education. There does seem to be a gap in students being prepared for the workforce who may not choose to get a four-year degree. And I'm wondering whether there are any initiatives at any of your schools for certificate programs or anything along that line to help fill that need.
We have at Lincoln attempted to respond to employers and respond to the industry by shifting the focus. So for example, employers told us that they were looking for engineers with more general experience as opposed to specialized experiences. So we've tailored our curriculum for an engineering sciences major. In a similar way, we now offer certification programs in gaming theory and cybersecurity, again, responding to what the industry is telling us in terms of the types of skills that are needed.
Certainly in terms of degree programs, we receive quite a bit of feedback from potential employers through committees at each school. We also are very close partnership with community colleges. We admit 2,500 students on transfer each year. And so they're at a community college where if they make the decision that they're going to go for a certificate, they're at a place where they can continue that education without having to transfer from Temple back to the community college.
Let me just add, because I think at the University of Pittsburgh, we have similar programs that are doing that. And as you pointed out, in some ways, the skill gap question that you were talking about is really a system response, right? Because different types of institutions will fill different parts of that gap. So in that spirit, one of the other involvements that we have is through our regional campuses, which tend to be sitting in very specific markets, looking at very specific types of skill and job placement, very often with students who want to stay in that area. And again, it's often in concert with the community colleges that we're having those discussions because, depending on what the issue is, whether it's a pre-professional type program, maybe in the health fields, or whether it's something related to the oil and gas industry, there's often both 4-year and 2-year type issues. And what we'd like to do is give a blended set of options with sort of pre-existing agreements between the community college and the campuses to make that work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Dinniman, I suppose you could go at this point.
Thank you, Senator Schmucker. Sorry you have to turn all this way. Because this issue of tuition is such an important one to all of our constituents, I just want to make sure I understand for the record what we're saying. Penn State is saying that if they get the governor's budget, there will be no need for a tuition increase.
That's correct.
Well, thank you for that, sir, and it's deeply appreciated. And my doctorate degree is out of Penn State, so I definitely appreciate Penn State being in the lead. And what is Temple's position, so that we all understand?
Well, if the increase is forthcoming, then certainly our increase will be at inflation or less.
So that one, Penn State, is not going to be at all. In your case, it would be less than inflation. And Dr. Harrison, if I understand it correctly, for the fall semester, there is no increase, or how?
Lincoln has already, even prior to the governor's announcement, decided to freeze tuition.
For the whole year?
Yes, so a student who began in the fall of 2014 will pay the same tuition for 4 years. We believe that it also encourages and motivates students to complete in 4 years. So that decision was made back in 2014.
Well, I thank you for that, and Immaculata, which is also, one of your sister that a student could go 4 years at the same tuition allows that family a great deal of planning. And I know in Immaculatus case, it's also helped them significantly with admissions. And I hope it does so for Lincoln as well. And finally, at Pitt, Mr. Chancellor.
So, I think we're not as far along in the process maybe as my colleagues are. So we would be, if the request came in consistent with the governor's language, we would be inclined to hold this lower than inflation, and of course that includes zero. But the one sort of point I would make though is that these, even at that level, the state appropriation only covers a portion of the discount to the in-state students. So that's one of the reasons the caution's a little bit there that we do want to look at that. But that was why we made the request, for the increase to hold these tuition increases as low as possible, so below inflation all the way to zero.
Well, I think the parents of this Commonwealth and the students take that, since the cost of education, higher education, has gone up much more than inflation, and it has come to a point where so many young people don't have any opportunity for higher education now, based on that cost. Also, I hope that we all understand that when the governor put that money aside for state-related and the state-owned, other parts of the program, other aspects of the state were not funded. And so his request that we do our best to keep it toward 2.0 if we can, or at least not more than inflation for the state-related, will motivate, I believe, the legislature to passing this, because we know that our constituents, the students and their parents, are going to be able to have a break through this process. So anything we do to encourage you on that endeavor is deeply appreciated, and we thank the governor for having put those resources in this area, understanding the importance and how vital higher education is. But when someone does something for us, I think in turn we need to do our best to make sure we don't raise the tuition. Chairman, I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Harrison. Lincoln University is in my district, and she has done a marvelous job in getting that university stabilized, and she has the full support of her faculty, of the board, and there have been, anyone who's followed the last several years at Lincoln knows that it was not an easy place to come in and get everyone to go in the same line together. And she's also become an essential part of our county, and so we deeply appreciate the work. Dr. Harrison, I know that Lincoln, last time, first let me say that there was discussion at our last hearing a great deal about the concept of dual enrollment, through which a youngster, or a young man and woman, I should say, can start on their college education. And I know that you're doing some great work in this, especially, or we hope it's going to take place. So we've been working together, especially in regards to some students in Philadelphia. I wonder if you might share some of that.
Yes, part of our concern around retention deals with the issue of college readiness. And so part of the difficulty in retaining students is they simply are coming to us unprepared for college. So colleges and universities are trying to come up with creative ways to really stand in the gap, particularly for those K through 12 systems throughout the state that may not have the financial resources to adequately prepare students. Many of them, schools do not have labs, some do not have basic supplies. And we know that African American students, for example, attend these schools in disproportionate numbers. The issue is significant because it really gets to the heart of a major cause of poverty and other quality of life issues for citizens of the Commonwealth. Studies confirm that with higher levels of education, the likelihood is that you will be employed, and you will be employed at greater wages. And so we have tried to come up with creative ways to meet this need. And so we are developing dual enrollment programs. And so we have relationships with the school districts both in Philadelphia and in Coatesville, and we have 46 students in Coatesville, we have 20 students in Philadelphia, that the students are taught by university professors. They have access to our facilities and to our labs. They earn advanced high school credit as well as college credit. And the goal is to create a pipeline to college, to reduce the need for developmental courses once the students get to college. So we're limiting debt, we're increasing tuition, and we're standing in the gap for underfunded public school systems. And so we have piloted 2 programs, and we hope to expand those in the future.
Well, let me thank you for that, and with Senator Hughes' help and others, we're also currently involved in conversations with the city of Philadelphia, where we would take anywhere from 50 to 100 students who are in high schools where there is no AP courses. If we go into some of the schools, there is no lab. They're not even certified teachers. Part of what Arnie Duncan was pointing out, when students in poor schools are given 33% less than students in, say, most of my schools in my district. And those students will be able to spend 2 years at Lincoln. They'll be taught in the city, where they'll be able to get 2 years of college, rather than not have any opportunity. We hope to working with Senator Hughes and with others, to use the governor's dual enrollment funds, plus funds that we can get from as we relook at the Bond Hill Scholarship Fund, which actually has a surplus. We hope to be able to get money so we can take care of all 4 years. So this is exactly the kind of creativity that we're looking for, and we thank you for that, Dr. Harrison, and we thank all of you in higher education for every effort you're making to keep tuition reasonable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Dinniman. Senator Tartaglione, followed by Senator Rafferty.
Over here. Each of you, thank you very much for coming. You all do a very great job. I only have a couple questions. Have you reached out to some of our veterans who are returning home from active duty and trying to get them situated?
Do you want to go in any particular order?
Sure, jump on.
Okay, so Penn State's named one of the most veteran-friendly universities in the country. This is 3 pieces here. One is to create a sense of community for vets, because they don't come and live in a residence hall. They don't make friends the same way. They're older, they're more mature, they've had a different life experience. So you have to build this sense of community and partnership. This helps a lot with retention rates. Second is to have them realize that you provide services, so that you go from a military where you go to one person to get the answer to every question, to a university where you go all over the place to get an answer depending on what the question is, and also to provide that assistance with things that are quite complex like VA benefits. And the third part is to celebrate veterans and their service as part of the university, and literally university-wide. So we work on all 3 of those. We also have working on a program by which, based on your experience, you can move forward more quickly through the system. So we take it very seriously.
So at the University of Pittsburgh, we have a long track record of working with veterans from, the rapid growth with the GI Bill after the Second World War to the founding of the VFW at the University of Pittsburgh, which we just celebrated the anniversary this year. So it's actually it's a big part of our program as well. We have special programs within our College of General Studies, which support particularly students in non-traditional trajectories, coming in older or with military experience. We have military liaison officers there to support them directly. We have about 750 veterans currently enrolled in our campuses right now. And I just wanted to highlight one sort of special area at the University of Pittsburgh with our large biomedical and rehabilitation sciences program. We have a large attraction for veterans who are returning with physical or emotional disabilities, and in fact want to make that part of their field of study so they can give back. And so our human engineering laboratory, where we're looking at assistive technologies for people with all kinds of cognitive or physical disabilities, and we see a very large number of veterans there, and a lot of collaboration with the military in those programs as well.
As the father-in-law of a Marine who served in Iraq, this is a hugely important issue to me. 3 years ago, when I became president, we set up a full-time office director that her role is recruiting and retaining military veterans, allowing them to access their benefits, which, as Eric mentioned, is quite complicated. So this is I think it's a high priority for all four of us going forward. And to honor their service, and one of the highlights of the beginning of the year each year is I get to meet with all of the veterans who are coming to campus for the first time in the fall. It's one of the most important things that public universities do in this era.
And we too have a specific function within our enrollment management department specifically geared to recruiting and supporting veterans. And we publicize and advertise that we are a ribboned university in terms of our support for the veteran population.
How about recruiting people with disabilities?
We have a large disability resource office. We have about 2,000 students that are registered with that office, and we provide the full range of services, including the help in the classroom as far as if you're sight impaired, hearing impaired. It's a very large operation. We're seeing at universities a large number of students who, when I went to college, would not have had the ability to access higher education. And so therefore we need to have the services that match the large numbers of disabled students that we're enrolling.
We too have a specific function within our Student Affairs Department to support students with disabilities and to ensure that we're in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act and state laws that govern this area, but also to provide accommodations from extra time to access to physical facilities. Many of our buildings are new, but those that are not, we've ensured that they're in compliance. So it is a specific part of our recruiting and of our student services function.
Yeah, let me just, so we don't just I don't want to repeat some of the same programs that we would have at the University of Pittsburgh, but let me highlight for you just a couple of thoughts. First of all, you can never do enough to support them. And so one of the early focal points I've had coming in is to take a look at our assistive technologies and our programs to see whether we're supporting students with disabilities across the campus. And I would say, yes, we're in compliance, but that should be really the floor, not the ceiling, and there's a lot more that can be done. And in fact, a lot more that's possible as we look at new technologies in the classroom that in fact really open up a lot of opportunities to do a lot more. And the other thing I wanted to highlight that is interesting at the University of Pittsburgh, being in an urban setting where the city is our campus, some of the real interesting things that are being done are to look at not just the what we're doing to support the in the classroom or in the residence hall experience, but what we're doing to help those students explore the full range of possibilities that are in the city of Pittsburgh. And so that includes GPS mapping of our sidewalk systems and other areas to look at wheelchair mobility. This is a hilly area to provide almost MapQuest type technology to support different modes of mobility through the area. And so there's a lot of excitement and ownership over this as a realm of innovation within the university as well.
So we're in the middle of our Middle States accreditation visit right now, and so I don't have these numbers perfectly, but my memory is about 1,900 students registered with disabilities at University Park and about 1,500 in the Commonwealth campuses. And so as part of this, like my colleagues, we take that accommodation and work to ensure the success of those students very, very seriously. But I have to say, you said recruit, and I'm not sure that there are programs for which we actively recruit as opposed to looking at academic credentials and accepting those students. So I wanted to be careful to answer your question directly.
That was going to be the next question. As you all know, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. So whatever you can do is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tartaglione. Senator Rafferty, followed by Senator Baker.
Thank you
for being here this afternoon. Huge proponent of the state-related university system, having obtained degrees at 2 of the 4. So I thank you for that golden opportunity. I'm cognizant of the fantastic educational opportunities available to 4 state-related and the economic engines that each of you are for your portions of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so thank you. I know Temple has the fly-in 4, and I just found out Lincoln has frozen tuition. Are Pitt and Penn State looking at the same type of programs going forward? Regardless of what happens with this year's budget, going forward for students entering your universities, are you looking at trying to freeze the tuition to try to make it more attractive and cost-effective for students?
So the answer, of course, is yes. I think you have to approach every budget discussion within the university with the intent to hold it as close to zero as humanly possible, because the cost of higher education, and you'll see this in a lot of the discussion, is starting to perturb education itself, whether that's the way student debt is impacting student decisions after graduation in terms of needing to seek employment.
Chancellor, we're limited time. My specific question was, are you at Pitt, are you at Penn State adopting similar to what Lincoln and Temple have done, that if you come in at this year, it's going to be frozen for 4 years?
Yeah, my apologies. We are
That's okay.
we are looking at trying to hold the tuition low, and we are also pushing to get the graduation rate to 4 years.
So we're being more directed. The average for University Park undergraduate is 4.2 years. What we discover is that it is those need-based students that are taking longer, borrowing more, because they're taking a lower credit load while they're working. So the programs that we have are directed in a very targeted fashion to increase the graduation rate of those students and get them to finish in 4. Students going years 5 and 6 at Penn State, the last class that we have, borrowed $23 million in order to do that. We think these very targeted programs that take the lower end of the economic spectrum and make sure they graduate in 4 will drive down our student debt, and that 4.2 will get even closer to 4.
I commend you for that, and Chancellor, I mean to cut you off, but Chairman Brown's very hard on us, so we have to keep it moving. I don't want to be remiss, and I want to thank all 4 of you for your government affairs offices, and specifically we worked very closely with Ken and Paul and Michael, and they answer any questions we have regarding the operations of universities to the status of applications for a constituent son or daughter. So thank you for that, for having them available and the opportunities they give us. How are we making out with online courses? Are we expanding the offering of the online courses not only at the undergraduate level, but the graduate level of the 4 universities?
Okay, so our baccalaureate program was ranked by U.S. News and World Report as the best online program in the country. We have something between 9,000 and 11,000 students that are getting their degrees in this way, and many other part-time students. It also provides flexibility for our residential students and helps promote lifelong learners. This is both at a graduate level and an undergraduate level, and a very large spectrum of degrees that are offered, taught by our faculty, run by our academic programs with technological support from the university centrally. Extremely successful, and we enjoy providing this opportunity, and we have a target to hit 15,000 students getting their degrees online before the end of this decade.
Excellent.
Our focus at Temple is a little different than Penn State in that we're focused more on graduate programs. Our graduate MBA is the #1 ranked graduate MBA online in the country. We do undergraduate more at the junior and senior level, and more in the form of hybrid courses as opposed to online standalone. We do not do much freshman and sophomore in online. It's just a different focus trying to get to the same point.
We at Lincoln are not as far along. We have received approval from middle states to offer complete programs online, one being a master's program in human services, the other an RN to BSN program, and we have a faculty standing committee evaluating our potential and effectiveness. However, it does depend to some degree on our technological infrastructure, which is not as far along and well developed as we would like, and part of our request while we're here today.
So the University of Pittsburgh, I would say our online programs are more limited and targeted to augment the residential experience. So in some areas, we have those programs, and others, we do not.
Thank you. And just rather quickly, Mr. President, I know you're prepared to speak on this. I was a student body president at University of Pittsburgh Johnstown, so I had people come to me all the time for funding requests for different entertainments and speakers. I was very disappointed. I know it's not you, I know it's a student body. Very disappointed at their selection of a speaker. Associated with an organization that was founded to destroy the principles of this country and actually murdered people in this country. And the speaker there showed no remorse for his time in that group. When we have, at our golden opportunity here in the United States, World War II vets who are dying off but survived Normandy and Iwo Jima, who could come and speak and talk about education and what it's done for them. People from the civil rights movement who are still here with us could talk about how that advanced them themselves, and people that have been golden force in politics or religion who could come speak. They were real heroes. This is not a hero. And I was very disappointed to see that. I realize freedom of speech, I understand that, but somehow fees were used. They were student fees, but somehow fees were used to pay somebody who's been an unrepentant engineer of standing against everything that we in this country have been founded, and Penn State is founded on. And I was very disappointed in that, Mr. President. But I know it wasn't you. I'm not slamming you for that. And I would tell any of the student leaders that hired this individual to speak that I think it was the wrong move to make. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rafferty, Senator Baker, followed by Senator Vance.
Good afternoon. I too want to thank you for your update on what you're doing on military-friendly campuses. We had a hearing a number of years ago, and the progress is excellent, and so thank you. I want to acknowledge that. You've spent considerable time talking about steps to ease the burden for students and their families. We've focused on tuition freezes, lower tuition costs, but in actuality, that isn't the current real cost for a student to attend. We look at fees, room, board, all of those things. And so I would really appreciate knowing what your increases are for fees, room and board, and what is your actual cost for the student and their family, not just the tuition, but across the board. What is the sticker price for a student coming in at this time?
So I'm going to have to get back to you with the number, because off the top of my head, I don't have the total cost of attendance number on the, but maybe by the time we get to the end of the
I know
panel.
with Penn State, your board just approved a 3.9% increase in room and board fees. Do you have plans?
So ours will be less than 1% next year. So we have to look at the total set of costs that students are incurring, whether those are direct and charged by the university, or whether they're incidental costs that the students are experiencing while we're there, because that's really, from their perspective, the affordability of education is all of the costs. So we try to manage the ones we can to have
What is
lowest
the
impact.
annual cost all in for your,
That's the one I'm going to get to by the time we get to the end. I have
Thank
to
you.
do the math.
Okay, so I do want to comment on the housing, and so basically this is the way we operate. We operate at cost, and because these are auxiliaries, and we do it deliberately, so no tuition dollar or state appropriated dollar crosses over into housing, we make sure that they basically, as they describe it, are a tub on their own bottom. So typically what you're looking at are costs that are right around the rate of inflation. There is one difference here, and that is there's a 1.75% that is added to that amount at the current time. And the reason for that is because the growth of Penn State, and when we built our residence halls, was 1960-61. So you're looking at residence halls that are now 50, 55 years old, very different than, and not in great shape. And so in order not to create a downstream liability where they just fall apart, the 1.75 ensures that that physical plant is well taken care of, and we're not just creating a very high cost for students down the
so
stream.
what is the bottom line
So-
number for a student at Penn State?
So for a bottom line number for students at Penn State, what is reported in the last time where everything was summed up was about $28,000 a year. And and about $9,000 cheaper than that if you enter on the Commonwealth campus. And so almost half of our students are in their freshman and sophomore years looking at something that is about $9,000 cheaper.
And as we're having this dialogue, the governor does have a proposed sales tax on fees, not necessarily tuition, housing, and the like. And so is that going to add to the affordability question potentially as well? You may be getting increases in your line items, but that's another factored increase that families are going to have to support moving forward.
The tuition component for the in-state resident rate, I believe it's $14,016, if I remember right. Room and board, it depends on where you choose to live. We have housing that is much older.
I'm talking about on-campus housing.
And I'm talking about on-campus housing, yes. We have housing that is older, and you have a shared bathroom down the hall, and it is minimalist. That would be in the range of $5,000 to $6,000 a year. You can live in much nicer housing where you have your own bathroom and so on, and that I think is about $10,500. So the student would choose. We always make sure that the increases each year are greater for the higher priced units than they are. We're trying to provide.
And your annual fees as well.
Annual fees are in the tuition fees.
The tuition fees.
For an in-state student, our tuition, which again has been frozen, is $7,160. If you add room and board, which is roughly, again, it varies depending on the newness or how many amenities you have, but room and board would be an additional $8,500. And we have fees totaling about $3,000, so you're looking at a total price tag that's hovering around $20,000.
So I guess the question is the proposal to put sales tax on housing and fees and the like. Do you feel a concern about that proposal, and would that give you cause for concern for your students?
I guess the honest answer is I'm not sure if I'm concerned until you look at the final, because if some numbers go down and others go up, the amount of concern will depend on where that ends. It's certainly going to be shifting where the costs are. My crude calculation is the Pitt all-in, assuming residence, is $28,772, and a quick estimate of the impact of the state sales tax for a typical student, we're somewhere in the order of $400 or $500.
Thank you, Senator Baker. Senator Vance, followed by Senator Schwenk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we have some new faces at the table today, and I guess, Neil, that makes you the seasoned veteran.
Yes.
You're the only one coming back from before. Yeah. I have a question, but it's a very specific question. I want to know your graduation rate for people who started at your school, for incoming freshmen, not transfers, just your incoming freshmen. What's your graduation rate for somebody you've had since the inception of their schooling? Doesn't matter who starts.
Four-year graduation rate at Temple is 44%.
Thank you.
Our six-year graduation rate is 42%, and it declines from there.
Did you say 6-year?
The 6-year is 42. It declines. The 5-year is 40, and the 4-year graduation rate is 26.
Okay.
So our graduation rate for University Park is 86%, and it is lower for Commonwealth campuses, 56%, but the students who come on to and transition to University Park is a substantially higher number, and this reflects the number of people that are working on a degree at a very slow pace.
So 4-year at the University of Pittsburgh is 64.4%. 6-year is over 80%.
Thank you. How many of you have nursing programs? I know Penn State does, but, okay. I was interested in one of the information that was presented to us. We talk about the need for nurses, for advanced practice nurses, but the one thing that I don't see in any of the information is a doctorate degree for nursing. And because you can have all these nursing students, if you have no one to teach them, you're going nowhere. So how many of you have a doctorate degree for nursing, either online or on campus?
We do have a doctorate in nursing program at the Pittsburgh campus.
We've just created, out of Health and Human Development, a College of Nursing that focuses on the full spectrum of nursing degrees.
No, you're exactly right. The hiring PhD-trained nurses is extremely difficult.
Like psychiatrists.
Yeah. And I know it is under discussion, but we do not train doctoral nurses.
We just started our BSN program, and so we're just getting that off the ground, and so we have not been in a position to offer the doctoral program yet.
I'd like to be a little more specific about this question. I hear from people who already have their master's degree, who are working as nurses, who would like to get their doctorate, but cannot take off and go to pursue it. How much of the doctorate is online?
I couldn't answer that off the top of my head, but I do agree that that's an issue. In fact, with the faculty at the University of Pittsburgh Nursing School, one of the goals we've had is to give them all an opportunity to get their doctorate as well. But we can certainly get back to you with that information.
Thank you.
I apologize, I don't know the answer to that question, but we will certainly find it.
Thank you very much. Okay. This is just, I hate to pick on Penn State, but these are the two questions I have. I'm not picking on you. The possible merger between Pinnacle and Penn State, I know that the boards have approved it. Now, am I correct that it has to go through the court proceedings? Is that the next step?
So it goes through the FTC and through the state of Pennsylvania, and I believe only if there's a problem is there a court element of this. I mean, we look at this very favorably. Pinnacle is very efficient and very effective. Hershey and Penn State have very high-end care, but also take other patients. The partnership between the two of them allows Hershey to focus much more on that high-end and difficult set of cases so that their beds are used in that manner, while the partnership with Pinnacle. And in looking at both, every single projection that we see is that this will make costs lower, and we will have a more secure margin. We look upon it at the university as a very favorable development.
And lastly, I do thank Penn State, because for years at Appropriations, I always ask, why don't you have in-state tuition for law students? You finally do. But it took a little while to get there. But the question that the two schools, Dickinson, Penn State Dickinson, and Penn State will split apart again. And will this become effective? Tell me the date again for those incoming students this next fall.
Yes. Okay, so two things. I believe that we haven't crossed that line on the in-state tuition, but we have a heavily discounted tuition.
All right, maybe I misspoke,
Okay.
but
But in many ways.
in essence, it's almost like in-state.
It is a significant commitment on behalf of the university, on behalf of the provost, to make sure that, that we have very high standards in successful law schools. For a while, we experimented with the two locations under the umbrella of one dean. To tell you the truth, we had to get an exception from the American Bar Association in order to have that model. So they actually didn't think this was a very good idea. And it was our faculty that basically said, you know, we can be much more effective in developing programs and differentiating programs in Carlisle and in State College. We believe we can be much more successful. And so at this time, this idea originated from the faculty. And I will say that between whatever we're doing and the discounting on tuition and some of the visibility, we have very good enrollment numbers coming in for the fall, and we feel very good about it. And the institution is completely and totally committed to making sure that those law schools are very successful.
I'm delighted to hear that, since the Dickinson campus is in my senatorial district. The only complaint I heard was for the differential for tuition. They did get a break, but it wasn't retroactive, so those students who were already second and third year students didn't apply to them. I got lots of letters from law students who are very good at articulating that they were very unhappy with that. Otherwise, it's a good thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Vance. Senator Schwenk, followed by Senator Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. You know, as I'm sitting here looking at all of you very ably answering these questions, I'm reminded that each of you manage or serve as de facto mayors of larger populations than many of the boroughs and townships in the Commonwealth. It's a daunting task. I just want you to know that I appreciate it. As we look forward, I mean, I look at demographics, and one of my concerns is as we look at the physical plant as well as the infrastructure that we build for educating students. Are you looking out into the future in terms of what population looks like? I mean, many of us talk about traditional students, and I think we're thinking in the 18 to 24-year range. But those lifelong learners, for example, Dr. Barron, that you talked about, where do they fit into the picture? How will each of your institutions deal with the changes that we see in population, not just in Pennsylvania, but in the populations that you attract as students?
So, my colleagues don't mind, I'll answer first because we have a very unique geographic footprint. So actually, at this last board meeting, I presented projections for the state of Pennsylvania in 2020 and out to 2040, and even by the catchment area of each of our campuses so that we could look at changes in population, changes in the diversity of those regions, and what the implications would be for the health of our university from the moral imperative that we have to educate the students of the Commonwealth, which we take very seriously, and the model from the viewpoint of whether our business, that we function successfully. And you do see projected for, over the last decade, about a 4.3% decline in birth rates in the state of Pennsylvania. And this tells us by the time this reaches college age, that we're going to have to be more effective about recruiting students and retaining students, and even reflecting the needs of the particular regions in the state. We think that we can do that. We ran 127,000 applicants to get into Penn State last year. We were about 4 or 5% above that. That was an all-time record. We're about to hit another all-time record. So part of us sits back and says, okay, this is okay, look at all these applications. And the other part of us looks at our role in the Commonwealth and says that, we need to do a better job. We're very conscious of how important the physical plant is. We're very conscious of how the cost is. And another major element of our request for an appropriation is actually to focus on economic development and job creation with the idea that we should be doing this within each of our campuses, not just to think about the $800+ million of research coming in the university, but how do we promote the economic development within each of the catchment areas that make up Penn State University. So we take this very seriously from a lot of fronts.
I'm glad to hear you're doing that long-range planning. How about Pitt, for example?
So, I would say it's probably one of the most important parts of my job is to try to look into that crystal ball and project the big changes. And it's more than demographics. If in some ways that would be nice if it was just looking at the long-range census numbers. But, the unknowns are also quite important. So, to what extent is business growth and economic growth in the state, in the Commonwealth, going to drive, for example, immigration into the area? That's critically important. We have to, it's very competitive now. This is a role I think the state relateds play an enormous role. Within specific fields, we are seeing major disruption in what these fields look like. That's true in law. That's true in medicine. Some of the changes happening in the healthcare arena are reshaping entire fields. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the role of technology and to what extent these new modes of providing and consuming education, whether it's, for the traditional four-year program or whether it's a lifelong learning and sort of a continuous engagement. And so the real ingredients is to put all this together, and that's why we've initiated sort of a major strategic planning exercise with our board, working with all of our faculty and students to try to, come up with a roadmap for addressing that. But it's a major issue.
It's important to us too, as well, to be sure that we can support what you see. We look to you to do that. Temple and
Sure.
Lincoln as well.
Our strategy is to more effectively bring into college those working class students who have not traditionally gone. If you look at the lowest quartile in income in the United States, less than 10% of the children ever complete college. If you look at the top quartile, 85% complete college. So there is an underused pool of students there. The change we're making for next year, we have something called the Temple Option, which we got a grant from the Gates Foundation to look at. We still take GPA, high school GPA, we still take recommendations from teachers and counselors, but instead of having them submit the SAT, which there are concerns that SAT prep actually works. In other words, those people that can afford it, research will tell you they do better on the SAT. So we're trying to take those students who can't afford SAT prep and saying, answer these 4 essays that we've developed with the help of Gates that looks at self-determination, grit, how have you overcome problems in your life. And we have graduate students that read, 2 of them read each of those. And so we're trying to reach beyond and actually increase the size of the people that are available to come to Temple University.
Dr.
Thank
Harrison.
you. We have a demonstrated commitment to really offering opportunities beyond to traditional college populations, and that's what our dual enrollment program is about. It's about reaching back, even as far as middle school, to ensure that we have a skilled workforce for Pennsylvania industry. And just by the nature of our history and our mission, we have reached out to students who may not otherwise have the opportunity. So 50% of our students come from, our first generation college students, for example, 50% come from families with a household income less than $50,000. And so that is the track record that we have in terms of trying to educate sort of the non-traditional student, if you will.
It appears, I'm encouraged, it appears that all of you are looking in some way at what the future, is for us. It matters certainly to us, as I had mentioned. I think, too, that looking at what the business or the corporate interests are in higher education and how you could accommodate them are certainly things I know you're looking at, but I hope you'll continue to do that, maybe even more proactively. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schwank. Senator Wiley, followed by Senator Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that was brought up earlier was your collaboration with your local community colleges, and that's intriguing to me. In the Northwest, in Erie County, we currently do not have a bricks and mortar community college. Could you expand on your relationship with the community colleges in your area? I'd be intrigued to hear some of those details.
Let me start, because I suspect we all have pretty strong ties with the community colleges because they play such a critical role as both a gateway institution and also in this 2- and 4-year, many of the problems we seek to solve are going to be solved in partnership with these institutions. I would say that you tend to form relationships, particularly with community colleges in the communities. I mean, that sounds obvious, but we tend to have the strongest relationships with those community colleges that are really feeding and have close proximity to our campuses, whether it's our main campus in Oakland or in the regional campuses. And one observation I will make here in the Commonwealth is that our community colleges are quite autonomous and separate. So from our perspective, you're not dealing with a system. We actually have to go in and work with each one. And I would say the relationship is pretty robust in particular cases. So CCAC in Allegheny County is a community college where we have a very deep relationship. We have extensive articulation agreements to accept their students in a whole variety of programs. We frequently get together and talk about new opportunities, look at the shifting demographics in the area in terms of employment, try to anticipate whether we can deploy our community colleges in partnership, our regional campuses in partnership with them, and we look at shifts. So it's vitally important. But it is complicated here.
So we really have a variety of pathways. Right now, we're looking at about a population within our Commonwealth campuses of about 30,000 undergraduates. The interesting thing is we have opportunities from transition to community college, but in addition to that, all these Commonwealth campuses also have a pathway and relationships with a local or local community colleges. So, for example, last week I gave a talk at the Chamber here in Harrisburg on the role of Penn State in economic development. And one of the pictures was to put out there with Harrisburg Community College, which was a major provider for the Harrisburg campus of Penn State. And if you talk to the chancellors, they will describe in great detail the relationships and partnerships that they have with community colleges. So in this particular case, we have multiple pathways into the university and a great education that comes from Commonwealth campuses directly, community colleges to Commonwealth campuses, and beyond.
Our entering class each year is 7,000. We reserve 2,500 of the 7,000 for transfers, mostly from community colleges. The other piece of that is making sure that their credits count at Temple and they don't have to retake courses. So we have very detailed by degree agreements with each of the community colleges as to what courses they will take there that then will be accepted at Temple.
Our relationships with community colleges take basically two forms. One are what you've heard, articulation agreements with the local community colleges, where there is automatic admission to Lincoln if they meet certain minimum eligibility requirements after the 2-year experience. But we have a special relationship with Delaware County Community College. We call it the BEST program, and we believe that this helps to facilitate the transition to college. Delaware County students, some of them live on our campus in our residence halls. They take part in our social activities because we recognize that certain students may not have a home environment that is conducive to learning. So if they come to Southern Chester County in a rural area, in a beautiful space and wonderful dorms, that they may do better. And so that is what our plan is with Delaware County, and that program has been very successful.
Interesting. Well, I'm jealous, just to tell you very clearly, because I think that there's a very unique relationship that can be established from the four-year universities and the community college, and unfortunately we don't have that in Erie County today yet, but I think it would strengthen our position. One additional question. As you've seen recently in the news, many campuses across the nation are battling culture. Are battling some very difficult times, a lot of sexual violence on campuses. We've had recent issues with Greek life. I don't want to highlight one or the other, but I think it's an issue that we should be talking about, an issue we should be addressing. And I just wanted to know a little bit about what your universities are doing to address some of these issues.
Sure. So, it's interesting. Universities have always been at the forefront of cultural issues in our society, and this is no different. And I think my philosophy on this is we should seek to lead rather than just react to these issues. I mean, we're talking about basically the safety of students, that are, going through an education, trying to prepare themselves. This is the last place we want for them to be harmed or to be put in harm's way. What is, and I think you're going to hear sort of a profound commitment. I know it's one of the top things we're focused on right now. And dealing with culture is always interesting. And I would say this is a place where the media is being a little bit less helpful because let's take sexual assault as an example. What you're really talking about is the responsibility of the university to create a climate that is protective against sexual violence in the university. Of course, there's also individual accountability that's criminal in nature. And part of creating a climate, if you will, the institution's responsibility, is its conduct and compliance systems. And of course, what happens in a situation where you're trying to get better is you focus on the problems, and that tends to put a very strong focus on the compliance side. So imagine that from a different world, it's like a company having safety problems, and the first thing you look at is their safety compliance program. But you know that you're never going to create a really world-class safe organization if all you focus on is the compliance, the stick. You also have to address the attitudes, the training, the environment, the commitment from the top all the way through. And so a lot of what's happening in this area is not just focused on the jurisdiction and the who's in charge and how do we investigate. A lot of this is engaging students early, talking about education, talking about the role of alcohol and drugs, talking about bystander and the responsibility that we have towards each other in a community, and trying to basically foster that wholesome side of the culture. And it frankly takes a commitment from every single person, and that's been the message to our staff is this is not something that's going to be outsourced into a sexual violence office. This is something where it's all hands on deck and we all have a role.
Very important topic, but in the interest of time, we will need to move on. All right. Senator Wiley, is that okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. Senator Wagner, followed by Senator Smith.
Good afternoon. I've enjoyed the dialogue, the questions, and the responses, and my questions are financial related. in the governor's budget, and we're all aware that the governor has a very lofty budget that's been presented to us. For the 4 universities, the governor has budgeted $82 million in increases. I have the information you have supplied to us, and all I'm seeing are expense sheets, and I'm not seeing asset and liability balance sheets. Is it possible to have those supplied to us?
Certainly can, yes.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested in seeing, what you have in endowments, what you have in cash, just assets and liabilities. And I think for us to, you're basically approaching the Pennsylvania Bank and Trust looking for money, and I think any financial institution would ask for that. So if you could supply that to it, that would be helpful. In the Penn State, and this is just I was reading through on page 12 of the book that you handed out, under facilities, it talks about, your a total of $13 million is projected for facilities cost increases and projected revenues, and I added the numbers up that are in here, and it talks about your physical plan is aging, and I did some quick math, and it's about $50 million. In the event that you were not mandated to use prevailing wage scales on construction projects, do you believe this would save you money on your projects?
Okay, I would rather, if I had that, do the calculation for you and come back and give you that number and what the difference would be, because I don't right off the top of my head know an impact.
It would be interesting. It would be interesting for us because obviously all the prevailing wage mandates on schools and your facilities, it's big money, and I think that it's worth looking at because we have to understand. I think the citizens of Pennsylvania are. I can tell you right now, everybody's still in shock over the governor's budget, and I think it's time that we start understanding what all this stuff is costing. So, if you could supply that in the balance sheets, that would be helpful. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wagner. Senator Smith, followed by Senator Eichelberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony here today. And something that's been alluded to, I think, a little bit is that all 4 of your institutions in your respective communities serve as economic engines. Not only you have the important mission of fulfilling your education role and educating the next generation to prepare for the 21st century economy, but also serving as economic engines. And one particular measure that was just announced in Pittsburgh recently by Chancellor Gallagher, along with UPMC and CMU, is the Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance, which is a very exciting proposal and idea, certainly concept in Western Pennsylvania, and something that's going to build off of what is already present in Western Pennsylvania, which is a strong foundation of education and medicine-based economic development. And Chancellor Gallagher, if you could just go into a little bit of detail about what the Health Data Alliance is, what it means, what brought about the collaboration with UPMC and CMU, I'd appreciate that.
Great. So thank you. And, I think the magic sauce of economic development is to set the conditions for business success. And in a knowledge-driven economy, that's very often starts with know-how. Whether that's technology formally in the form of intellectual property, whether that's the talent of the engineers and scientists who help develop that, or whether that's the business savvy in terms of how to do that. So what we're always trying to do is create the conditions where that know-how is maximized and you become sort of the tipping point. You have a comparative advantage over anyone else. And it's probably the same way we would approach partnerships between our institutions in any case. You're looking for a combination of assets that are unique. And in the Pittsburgh area, we have the University of Pittsburgh, which is one of the top biomedical medical science programs in the country. You have UPMC, which is one of the leading healthcare providers in innovation with enormous amounts of patient data and over very long periods of time. It's one of the largest electronic medical records in the country. And then you have Carnegie Mellon, which has one of the top computer science programs. And so those 3 institutions together simply created the conditions that didn't exist anywhere else that would allow information to basically transform the way we diagnose, treat illnesses, and the way we do medical research. And so what we did by creating that alliance was to create the machinery where 3 very different organizations could work together where we sort of pre-negotiated how we were going to share information and pay for things and deal with IP. But the idea is it catalyzes the excitement around basically having a world-leading capability, and it also seeks to create the business conditions where startup companies and existing companies want to come in and partner. And so I think we're closer to the beginning than the end. That announcement, of course, doesn't by itself do anything, but there's an enormous opportunity here, and it's one of the reasons why I believe that your state-related universities play a unique and special role in driving and shaping economic opportunities for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And in fact, a lot of what happens in that space is even bigger, I hate to say this, but even bigger than our own appropriations. It's going to seek the alignment with what the state strategy is, whether it's in healthcare or whether it's in energy. There's a lot we can do to support an agenda that seeks to grow and enhance the quality of life here in the state.
And one of the things that we talked about when we met was the fact that, there's at least a potential where Pittsburgh can really serve as a global hub for health information technology, and that can sort of be the next wave of economic development in Western Pennsylvania, along with all the success we've had in energy and eds and meds. And from what I understand, this particular announcement indicated that there will be hundreds of millions of dollars in investment from UPMC, from the University of Pittsburgh, from CMU. Do you ultimately see, at least on the front end or on the back end or at some point in the stream, some sort of state role in leveraging additional dollars, additional economic development opportunity? Where does the state play a role, if any, in the collaboration?
Well, I would hope the state would see a large role for itself there. So we're talking collectively, just without any new federal money coming in, $250 million of new investment in this area over the next 7 years. That's going to have, when you look at the leadership position of this data and this infrastructure and these scientists and engineers, this is going to be something that's going to attract business, that you're going to really position Pennsylvania to play a leading role in sort of, being part of this new information health economy. So, I think that the state should look at ways to align its own economic development infrastructure, whether that's Ben Franklin's or land use or other sort of things, to make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction, so that as we seek to have the top companies want to come here, hire here, build out here, and do their research here, that they leverage these types of opportunities. And that's true at the state and local level. I will say the one flavor of this type of money, when you're talking about research that's focused on economic development, it's all leveraged these days. So private investors from companies want to come in, but they're often looking to see if the state has skin in the game. The federal government has put almost all of its new R&D money over the last 5 years in these sort of applied areas, but they're looking as a part of the grant criteria whether the states and the companies have put in money. So in some ways, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and that's why it's going to be so important for us to work together on these kind of opportunities.
Okay. Thank you, Chancellor. I think it's a great innovative collaboration, and as you said, each entity bringing its own skill set, if you will, to the table, I think is one of the many things that separates this alliance and collaboration apart from a lot of the other collaborations throughout the country. So thank you, and thank you for all the great work you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Eichelberger, followed by Senator Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Barron, to follow up on Senator Rafferty's point about Bel Airs, I maybe not quite as generous as he was with his comments about that. I do think the university has a responsibility here. It's a reflection on the school. I've heard from many people about it. Does the university have any plans to develop a policy to have some kind of safety net in place so that when the students make a bad choice that there's a check and balance in place here?
Unfortunately, I believe that would be a violation of the law. As a matter of fact, I believe there was a Supreme Court ruling which suggested that student fees that are collected for a defined purpose like this and go in the hands of our students to make those decisions, that we cannot then step up and say, no, you can't do that. And so, we have an enormous number of seminars and speakers that are selected in this way, and you know, I might have very strong personal opinions on the individual speakers, but this is part of the rules for fees. And you know, in this case, you've got a group of law students who are seeking an education in a particular purpose and for a particular purpose, and hopefully have their eyes completely wide open on what it is that they're doing and thinking. But the one thing we know for certain is I can't step in and say, no, you can't spend your student fees in that manner. And so this is why there is the comment about that separation, and the senator was saying that this wasn't Penn State that was choosing to do this. And so, but I suspect for many of the students who may have exceeded the number of communications that you yourself have gotten, have also learned quite a bit about what it means to invite somebody that's very controversial. I understand completely your viewpoint, but this is in fact, you know, sitting down with legal counsel and going through this and having this tested before what the laws are.
That's interesting. I recall another university in our area that had a similar circumstance, and actually in that case the president was out of town. It was announced that they were bringing in a speaker, and when he came back, he canceled it. He said, we're not going to do that in this university.
Well, if that was through student fees collected for that purpose.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
that may be a difference, although there should be a way somewhere to control that process, or have some kind of input or something. I mean, I can't imagine that everything at Penn State, if they were bringing in a group that I think, I mean, you know, who knows who. There's got to be some way to address that problem, I would think. And I would ask that you look into that and see if there's some way that the administration can put a you know, more experienced viewpoint into some kind of process here, so that it's not just simply the students running amok. Because I know how it was. I was a student at Penn State too. And people have crazy ideas from time to time, but I think the university has a responsibility there. How about a fiscal question? What percentage of the employees do you have at all your universities that are participating in PSERS or SERS, and how is that pension increase affecting your budgets for your staffing?
We don't have any at the university.
We don't have any.
I would have to get back on you on that. I don't know.
I think
And
Penn State does.
I have the number here somewhere, or if I can remember, I do know that the change in participation is a cost of about $10 million, and we do have a percentage that's in SERS and a percentage that is in TIA-CREF. My memory is it's slightly more in TIA-CREF than it is in SERS, but the cost to us of that change is about $10 million, or 1% tuition increase.
Pretty significant. I think I have time for one more question. This is a Lincoln University question. You are requesting $4.5 million for it's a new appropriation for tutorial and supplemental learning support. You remember that? Familiar
Yes.
with that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how you'd utilize the funds, and why you need that?
In our effort, again, the lack of college readiness, again, has led to lower retention rates and graduation rates, and the
So that's
accumulation.
a K through 12 problem.
That is a K through 12 problem, exactly, and we're trying to come up with creative ways to respond to that problem. And so first-year programs, for example, have proven to be effective in increasing the retention rate for first years, but we haven't really paid a lot of attention to the second-year programs and second-year students, and we forget that many students actually leave after even their second year. So we're looking at sophomore experience programs, and so we're looking to provide resources specifically to that population in order to increase retention and, again, limit student debt. We had a 2009 cohort who participated in a sophomore experience program, and they experienced a 13% increase in graduation rates. However, we don't have the funding to make that available to everyone, and students have to pay part of the cost for participation. So that's part of what we're trying to do, to really focus on retention, to focus on graduation, which is also tied to limiting student debt.
Got it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Eichelberger. Senator Blake, followed by Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Harrison, gentlemen, appreciate your testimony here today and your stewardship of your remarkable institutions. I have a couple areas I want to touch on. I do want to commend my colleague, Senator Wiley, for elevating the issue of campus security, and appreciate you keeping that top of mind for your students. Senate Bill 444 left the Senate unanimous last session, but did not get through the House. It was a bill that I've worked on for the past couple of years with Senator Pileggi, Right to Know. I need to express, or at least reiterate, the sentiments of Senator Rafferty on your governmental affairs folks who have been part of this process and have been very helpful. While the legislation is crafted inside this building, it's the input from the institutions and the exchange of information with the institutions that enables us to get it right. So would appreciate any reflections you may have on that. The bill that we've reintroduced in this session is Senate Bill 412. It will involve additional disclosures on salaries. It'll involve disclosures on campus police records, disclosures on revenue and expenditures, audited financial statements, minutes of your public meetings, a little more detail on how you actually expend the non-preferred appropriations, as well as information on contracts that you procure. So this is a major step forward, but I believe, at least insofar as the exchange of information that we've had, that it's something that you embrace and that you would support. And I think I'd like to hear your comment on that, but also to ask you to express your support for this measure so that the people in this building will move forward with it.
I will probably defer to my colleagues. Because of Lincoln's size, we were exempt from many of the provisions of that, and so I'll defer to my colleagues.
Thank you, Doctor.
As you know, we are supportive of this. I mean, the one caution I would make is the greatest asset of Temple University is its faculty. If the faculty salaries are public, while other public universities may have to publish their salaries, private universities don't. It puts us at a disadvantage in trying to retain the best faculty, because those are the faculty that the private universities will go for. We have no idea what their salary structure is. They know exactly what our salary structure is.
Understood.
So that would be the one caution.
I appreciate that. I think we've tried to address that by dealing with the range.
Exactly.
Of salaries.
And I'm very supportive of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first of all, I appreciate the idea of working closely, because I think we would be very responsive in talking about any limitations or unintended consequences. I worked at a university as president for which the right to know was almost unlimited, with a lot of unfortunate circumstances. For instance, negotiating media rights for a conference, the ACC, and not even being able to see them as a president because it would make it public. And I would like to echo this caution on salaries, and I think the range idea is a good way to do it. But this is what you discover. Your really good people get recruited by just about anybody because they go sit there and say, wow, that faculty member just got a major award. I can go to your institution and look up their salary. Oh, you know, the senior guy that just retired was making 30 more than that. I'll just give 10 of it and steal this person. And there's kind of a 10% rule. If you can add 10%, you make your faculty vulnerable. And then you also discover that other individuals not quite so stellar become quite frustrated and are in your office because they've noticed what their peers are making, and they view themselves as equally accomplished, and so they expect a raise. So my experience with a full-up reporting of salaries is it makes the university spend more money.
Understood.
And so this is something I think to avoid. Doing it in ranges certainly helps, limiting the number to be the top-paying one. Incidentally, I would say quite personally, I'm happy to have anybody see any administrative salary that's coming out of Penn State University. My interest is only to protect my faculty from being rated by other institutions, because in this case, we're in a national and international recruiting base, and with a whole lot of people that are competitive with what we are.
I appreciate that, Doug.
But thank you for the offer to work together, because we're happy to comply.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm quite supportive, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to work as a team on this. This is one of those issues where it's mom and apple pie. It's such a clear public good, and yet the downsides are all in the details. And you've been very working very closely with us and listening to our concerns, and have been very accommodating. And with that, our support is there. So
Appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, any more time? One more. Okay, well, I did want to, I had two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about your medical schools. I actually have a new one in Scranton. I've been concerned a little. The governor's trying to leverage some FIA money dealing with loan repayment. I think this issue of physician retention is an important issue that I hope you'll be active on. The generosity of our plan is not competitive with other states. But the last thing I do want to ask you about very quickly, the governor has suggested a manufacturing initiative, $5 million going to the IRCs, and he indicates in his budgetary documents leveraging the research institutions on advanced manufacturing. Can you comment on this? Are you involved in this?
We are involved and in fact, Pennsylvania was one of the partners in the first Advanced Manufacturing Institute. And I would say we have to be involved because in the United States, 2/3 of all the research and development that is is funded by the private sector, not by the government. And if you look at where that private sector investment is coming from, it's predominantly the manufacturing base. So here we are in a state with these tremendous resources, with research universities, with a history of manufacturing innovation. We should be competing second to no one in that area, and it's vitally important, and that's where almost all the new federal funding has been allocated recently.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Completely agree.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blake. Senator Vogel, followed by Senator Velakovich.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's great to hear you all talk about wanting to hold costs on tuitions and costs and things like that, because in the tough climate we're in budget-wise for us, as well as economic climate we're in the state, to be able to hold tuition costs and your other university costs the best you can is greatly appreciated. But I have one specific question for President Barron for Penn State. Basically, you're requesting another $3.2 million in your budget for agriculture research and extension. Could you explain how that's going to be spent, I guess, and how much of it, if any, is going to be used for salaries and benefits? And the third part of the question is, how much outside money do you get from businesses, conglomerates, seed companies, et cetera, for ag research at Penn State? Do you know those numbers?
I do not know the answer to that question. I'm happy to find the answer for you. To go back to the budget issue, last year was a freeze on that budget, and this year as well. And this is a world in ag extension for which this is a service to the state of Pennsylvania. And so the notion here is we deliver this service to you at a rate at which you are committed to providing those resources. So that stands there as a reflection of the state's interest and investment in agriculture, which has been very high and for which I hope will continue to be high. And so a portion of that budget is focused on basically holding your own. And that's a close to inflation number, which I believe is right about $2.2 million of that number that you cited. And the other portion of it reflects some new things, including food security laws, for which we believe we can be a great service to the state of Pennsylvania, if not an essential service to the state of Pennsylvania. So that basically is the purpose, to recover, hold our own. We plugged that hold your own last year with temporary dollars. And so, and you can't continue to do that. So that request is purely as an inflationary measure to hold our own, plus an additional program that I believe is largely focused in new laws on food security.
And how have your, what do I call it, I guess, your collaborations with the Agriculture Department on the 3 new programs for the food safety, plant safety, and animal safety we put together? We gave you like $100,000 a piece for those, I think, in the budget last year, I believe it was. Do you know, have any comments on how they're working out? Are they working out okay?
I'm happy to find out that answer for you, but I don't specifically know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Vogel. Senator Velakovich.
You know, I wasn't going to bring this subject matter up, but I feel I need to. Bill Ayers. You know, I was a policeman for 27 years. The day I put my uniform on the first time and looked in the mirror, I looked pretty good. And I said to myself, just as I looked at there, knowing that little baby on the way, that I want to go home. This guy, whether he did it or not, his group did. 9 children grew up without fathers. 9 children. 2 police officers and a security guard on a Brinks thing. He committed to blowing up properties. That was his way to get back at the evilness of America, you know, blowing up properties. And you know, rights, privileges, and responsibilities go hand in hand. If you don't take into consideration all 3 of those things, you can bet you're going to violate somebody's rights. Bill Ayers couldn't come in here right now, though he has a right to say what he wants to say. He couldn't come in here and stand here right now because you have a right to speak and we have a right to speak in exchange, and we have a responsibility to each other. He has to be granted a privilege to come in here. So if we don't give him that privilege, okay, he can't come in here and speak, even though he has a right to say what he wants. He can do it some other place. I get furious over that. I read the transcript, which I was going to read today, that you would be appalled at. It was done on July 1st of 14, Fox News, Megyn Kelly Files, where she interviewed him. Not once did he say he was sorry. And all he did was semantics on every answer he gave. I have no idea what they're paying this person. Probably a lot, because this is what he does. He goes around and talks. This is not the kind of guy we need in our institution, especially state of Pennsylvania, our state-related schools. Now, I understand maybe you don't have any authority over this, but I sure wouldn't let him on my campus property, use my campus facilities, use my campus security, or any other cost. They get away with the fees. You know, I'm not an attorney, and they're lawyers, I guess, or soon-to-be lawyers. I don't know what they expect to learn from this guy. They want to know what he's all about. All they got to do is ask me. I'll tell them. Evilness. He doesn't care. And he's going on that campus, probably most likely. But this is an affront to policemen, to veterans, and the general public with the rule of law. And I just cannot see this happening on our campuses. I cannot. And I don't know when this is supposed to take effect, but that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Senator Vlahovic. Senator Scabello? Not here? Okay. Senator Ward.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a couple of finance questions, and I think it was Senator Rafferty, one of the senators earlier talked about online classes. Are they less expensive for you to administer than brick and mortar classes?
Okay, perhaps slightly, okay? It is, first of all, it's very technology intensive, and if you have a very good program, it's delivered by faculty. And so a lot of our experiences are also a much more intensive course development. So for example, we match up our faculty with someone who's very tech savvy. So we don't just have the faculty member salary and development, but we always also have the person involved in technology in that development. And so there is some difference in tuition rate that is charged associated with the World Campus students, but it's not as large as people expect. And I think this is probably the experience that we're seeing across the nation. We may get to the point where a lot of those costs start to drop, but since you're building that portfolio of classes and you're adding more and more people as you grow, you actually have considerable people costs. Or, for example, testing centers and proctors, and so that you don't have people that may decide that they're not going to take that test quite the fair way that you might in a class. So there's a lot of different factors like that. It does enable people to stay in place. So this is a personal saving, especially in things like housing. So that is significant. It allows you to pace yourself so you can stay employed in a good job. There are a lot of good parts of it that you could look at as decreases in cost, but from a university viewpoint, it's actually very similar.
Another area I was wondering about is tuition remission for employees and their families. Do you all offer that? Every university offers that?
Yes, we
And
do.
could you have about approximate value of that, what the cost is for that?
For us, it would cover the basic tuition, which again is $7,160. Most of our employees, their children are within commuting distance, and so they don't have the fees attached to room and board.
Well, what I meant was, what would the value of that be if I was coming there and how many people did you serve last year about? I guess that's what I'm asking. I'm looking for the big picture cost of that.
And I can get back to you on that. I don't know the specific number or percentage of employees who take advantage of that, but I can get that number for you.
Yeah, stay with me, we'll send that to you.
So our faculty and staff have the opportunity to have a 75% discount, and the total cost for it, and we have close to 45,000 employees, is $30 million a year.
I'm going to have to get back to you because I don't have the number in front of me.
And just want to get to the Bill Ayers point. I'm not going to talk about Bill Ayers, but at what point would you step in? Like what? Because there are tax, not taxes, but there is university money there because of, as Senator Vlahovic said, security, campus. I mean, that is more than just student fees. At what point would you step in and say no? Because there are a lot of bad, evil groups out there that would probably love to get onto a campus. I mean, at what point do you step in? Do you change your regulations? Do you change your bylaws? Do you do something to stop this?
Okay, my belief is this is a Supreme Court tested case, that a student fee, the way to step in there would not be able to have students have fees where they were inviting speakers. This isn't something that we treat very casually. There are many, many times we have across this country, more and more speakers are being rejected by administrations on every end of the spectrum. If you pay attention to the number of commencement speakers that have been turned away, it is quite remarkable. Condoleezza Rice, George Will, the list goes on as administrations get quite sensitive. But I believe this part is tested by the Supreme Court, that a fee collected for this purpose, for which the students have the responsibility to that fee, then the university is not permitted to sit there and say, no, you cannot have that speaker. And if you remember, for one reason or other, these are law students. These are not people that have walked into this, and I believe the topic that was focused on was community to jail as a path for individuals. And the law students are picking it for a particular purpose. It is at that level for which it is very difficult for the university to step in. And so I believe it's tested by a court of law, and so it wouldn't be something we would say, here is a particular boundary. We certainly express our discomfort. As I said, our students got an enormous number of communications on what do you think you're doing. The event already did happen. And I'm sympathetic. You could have taken a picture of me in my office when I learn about a lot of things that happen on a campus.
So you couldn't say you can have that speaker, but you can't have that speaker on this campus. You can take your student fees and you could go somewhere else with that money?
I believe that would be also in that same vein.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say, as a resident of Hemphill Township, how much I appreciate the University of Pittsburgh here in our community, and Dr. Smith, and what a great asset you are for our community, and what a great asset she is as she serves on boards and serves us well. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ward, Senator Teplitz, followed by Senator Wozniak.
Thank you. President Barron, I want to ask on behalf of Senator Udicak, who has a bill, if you have a position on his bill to make the Penn State Board of Trustees the same composition and size as the boards of the other state-relateds, which, as I understand, would be 12 from the Commonwealth, 12 alumni, and 12 at large.
Okay, I believe I'm the only university sitting at this table that has alumni trustees. So do you have, how many do you have?
We have 6.
6, and so I have 9 plus the Alumni Association. I have not seen the bill. Okay, I don't know whether it's been filed. I've heard that it might be 12 alumni trustees and 12 at large. Currently, I have basically 17 that are at large, and so I'm not sure how many at large you have. 17. And so until I see the bill, I wouldn't be able to comment on whether they're the same. But my suspicion is that that's a challenge when you realize I'm the only land grant and ag school, and so therefore I have an ag component that's in there. I very much appreciate the fact that I have a very diverse board.
Could I ask your able government relations staff to make sure you see a copy of the bill and provide comments on the bill to the committee, because I think it's useful to get your comments on the issue of governance broadly. Obviously, that's been an issue that reached its height a few years ago, and it raised raised attention, I should say, about the unique structure of the Penn State Board. The university president being on the board and being the secretary, the governor having a vote on the board, the size of the board, the issues relating to a small amount of members needed to constitute a quorum, a revolving door between staff and board members, issues relating to the lack of enforcing term limits on board members, emeritus status to trustees. I know that Penn State has taken some actions on these issues. Could you talk to us about what actions you've taken, but also could you indicate whether it's still the university's position that you have the authority to make changes on your own unilaterally, given that many of these issues, if not all of them, were established in statute by the General Assembly?
Okay, so it's difficult to go through all of the sort of fog and discussion about this. I mean, this is a university, went through an incredible tragedy, and I keep telling people Jerry Sandusky is, the gift that keeps on giving, and the university has trouble escaping this, and it enters into every single part of our existence, with the exception of the applications to our students and the success of our faculty and our ability to get research grants. But certainly in terms of a public perception about issues and what people feel about the degree of control or lack of control with the board. Size is an interesting characteristic. I think we all have 36 voting members currently, and so that's interesting. That's not as big as some and not as small as some. And what it means is you have a lot of committees that do a lot of work and a smaller board can't. Okay, in terms of the representation on the board, ours is truly unique, but it partly reflects the uniqueness of an institution in terms of its scope and what we have as degrees. We have 9 from the governor, 6 and then three secretaries that are there. We have 9 that are elected trustees. And people say, well, what about the number of signatures to have an alumni elected trustee enter the race? Well, the interesting thing about it is if you go back when you're not dealing with a crisis, you have trouble getting people to serve on the board from an alumni elected viewpoint. And so because everybody is satisfied with the way things are going, and then all of a sudden you go through a period of crisis and you have 30-some people that want to be on the board. Well, 30-some people being on the board, and when you realize that of our alumni base, you're talking maybe 4% voting, I mean, we talk about the degree to which a public official today and the number of Americans that vote for elections and how important this is to us that elected officials are representative. And now we're talking about, 8,000 votes or 10,000 votes in a 650,000 alumni base electing an individual. So we narrow the number of, we changed the number of people to sign so that we don't have 30 with 800 votes and 1,000 votes. And also
Can I
we
get
have
you to
3 candidates.
Can I get you to focus on
yeah.
the question, which was the structure of the board and how the board operates?
So what I'm saying is that this is a challenge, and what we're watching in terms of operation is partially born out of crisis rather than functionality. And we will get to the point where that crisis is behind us, and that board will be functional from everybody's viewpoint. And I'm actually proud of the diversity of that board. Students provide an incredible value. I would not want to give up a student rep. The faculty, incredible value on academic excellence. I would not want to give that up. So we have a lot of strengths and we have problems that we just have to work through.
Yeah, and I don't want to be controversial, but I think some of the points you raise are red herrings. I mean, the issue, I don't think anyone's questioning the diversity of the board. I don't think anyone's questioning whether, Penn State needs to have a functioning board and whether it deserves to have an increasing number of applicants each year. I think people have questioned, does the president have too much power? Should the governor have a vote? Is it appropriate for trustees to be revolving back and forth between the board and staff? I think people have questioned whether the university is acting appropriately, and I was hoping to give you the opportunity to talk about some of the changes you've made, but is the university acting appropriately in believing, at least your prior position, maybe of your predecessor, had been that you could just act unilaterally as opposed to this being in the province of the General Assembly? That's what I was hoping to hear in your answer, and I don't know if the chair will allow you to then answer that question.
I do think it's a
Briefly,
tricky
if you
question. Our sense is that those appointees that come from the Commonwealth are things that are not up to our say. And nonprofit law, the rest of it, the legalist opinion is that we do have authority over those votes. So it's a mixed story, not a single story.
I'll state my disagreement for the record and then move on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Let's Senator Wozniak, followed by Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Harrison, President Barron, President Theobald, and Chancellor Gallagher, how are you today? Fabulous. Okay, it's almost over. I'm just interested in a couple things. One thing, and for Penn State, and I'll tell you for the record, I'm a proud graduate of the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, and a former chancellor said, we never have a main campus, we're all equal, so you might want to start trying that one. And I had 2 students that graduated from Penn State, so I carry one heavy debt now. The other one's been amortized over my lifetime, and I've done pretty good. The one question I have, I don't know if the 4 of you, if the information's there, but 5 years out from the cohorts coming out of that school, can you glean any information if they're getting positions in the fields or even the minors that they took in school? I'd be sort of curious for that information to see if we're educating those students in certain fields. 5 years out, that's a pretty good bellwether of whether they're going to accomplish that goal or not. I'd like to know, just for my information, if we're getting to what we need to be, or we're just putting kids through school and saying, hey, I'd like to see what that placement is. The other one is, I know I don't want to micromanage, but can you take your number of students, what's your average tuition, because some courses are more expensive than others. Take the number of students, the average tuition, the average room and board for the past 5 years, put in a column, plug in whatever you receive from the state, and you brought that up earlier. You're going to show us that the money we get from the taxpayers is Chevrolet, apple pie, and Mom. I know that. On the other side, can you put down your administrative costs and the cost of your professors, the educational part, because that's where the cost out is the personnel. And I'm not really looking for the individual costs of the professors, but the trend over 5 years to see if we're getting costs under control. And I think that's one of the issues that everybody wants to understand. And when you have universities of any magnitude, it's tough to get your handle around it, but I'm just sort of interested in that trend. If you can do that, That's what I would be greatly appreciative of. The other thing is, I wasn't one of the prime movers, but I was certainly one of the negotiators in that grand competition between Pitt and Penn State that'll be coming up shortly in 2016. And even though you guys weren't around, I would hope to perhaps humbly ask you that maybe I might be able to get on gridiron and flip that coin. Other than that, the one other issue, and I'm sorry for Temple and Lincoln, you're over on the other side of the state, and have a little more business with that, and you're probably saying, hey, that's okay by us. The University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, for years we tried to negotiate with the main campus, even though there's no main campus, about shifting from engineering technology to an engineering PE, and I think we're moving in that direction.
So those discussions are, yes, we are moving that direction because it turns out the engineering technician program was actually getting close to some areas of engineering. The real issue, I think, is going to be as you expand the scope of engineering offerings on the UPJ campus, it comes down to cost. It is an expensive program to operate. But I think in certain areas we can be responsive to the needs in Johnstown and get to an engineering program, and that's certainly the direction they're heading in. And the new facility will make a big difference as well.
Right. Some of that new facility is funded by, oh, that's right, RCAP, taxpayers' money. Yeah, I would be very interested for the alumni of the University of Pittsburgh, since we are ubiquitous and we don't have any branch campuses, to see that one of your favorite ones might be well taken care of there. That was only the other issues I had. We took care of that, but really interested in the trend of the cost of the students' costs, or of course what we place in, and that trending of where administrative and the cost of personnel comes in. And other than that, I thank you for everything you do. It's tough running a college with interesting young people full of ideals. And I will tell you, to Penn State, my kids both have jobs in their field and doing well. Some people can question what, if I got in my field, if I'm doing all that well, but I thank the education I did receive many years ago from that university. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Presidents and Chancellor.
Thank you, Senator Wozniak. Senator Hughes.
I can attest, Mr. Chairman, that Senator Wozniak, after 34 years in the field, you're doing pretty well, all right? First of all, thank you, everyone, and in the interest of time, I'll be brief. Statement first and then a question. As we respond to the pressures of who can speak where, at when, on what issue on your respective campuses, and I know that that has to be an issue that doesn't have a finality to it. You're always evaluating and thinking through that process, adjudicated, I guess, in some sense, at the Supreme Court level. I would just remind you that the brilliance of the university campus, of the university community, the brilliance in all of its aspects is the fact that a lot of people get together on one location to think about all kinds of different issues, to talk about all kinds of different issues. And even in that conflict of conversation and ideas, come up with some amazing things that jettison us forward as a broader community. And even in the most difficult environments and the difficult conversations that occur on our respective campuses, the brilliance of those campuses is that this is a relatively safe place to have broad thinking going on, even as uncomfortable as it might get, that it's good to have those kinds of conversations, even as difficult as they might be. So as you contemplate policy moving forward, hearing from our members, and I respect their thoughts and I respect their viewpoints, and I respect the uncomfortableness that we're confronted with. I also ask you to think through, as you work with your leaders of your campus, your boards, and what have you, that these places, your places, and all of the 150 some other campuses across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, private and public institutions, were created to be relatively safe places so that we can have those hard conversations, and hopefully something good comes out of that. the conflicts when it comes to conversations of philosophy or politic or history or science and technology. When those things collide with one another, it's uncomfortable, but hopefully something good comes out of that. And I think the expansion of your universities, all of them, is a result of some of that conflicting conversation happening. So I would just ask you to think about it. Don't need you to respond to it. Just ask you to just keep that in mind as you go forward. As the world is turning and changing and transforming itself, and we get conversations about the diversity of our environment and communities growing, if you will provide for me and members of the committee and those paying attention, what are the greatest obstacles that we need to think through with respect to more Hispanic students, more African American students on our campuses, in our faculty, in our administration, and how we can do a better job of aligning ourselves or creating better programmatic thrusts to respond to a quickly changing environment, not just across the Commonwealth, but across the country. What programs work? What do you need to see have happen? What can be supported? And just briefly from all four of you, what's the best way to respond to that? Madam President, you're in a bit different situation than everybody else.
Exactly.
All right.
So you know the preamble to this, but underlying for us, we're not asking again for bells and whistles. Fundamentally, automation has been a hindrance for us. And so, for example, we are trying just to meet the standard for our students. Again, reliable Wi-Fi, automation, so that we can have recruiting efforts that can be competitive with other institutions. Wealth screening capabilities so that we can start developing additional streams of income. Support for our talented faculty in terms of sponsored research. And all of this goes, I think, to generating and maintaining a diverse workforce. And you'll hear me saying it over and over again, but also funding for our dual enrollment programs and our initiatives around that, so that, again, we can offer opportunities to an even greater population of young people who may not have those opportunities because they simply won't be prepared for college. And so again, you hear me saying the same thing over and over again because it is simple. Again, this is not bells and whistles. It is standard things so that our students can compete and so that we can compete in terms of generating additional income and recruiting populations.
It's K-12 education. If you look at the high schools across Philadelphia, there are only 2 high schools in Philadelphia that the average SAT score is above the national average for every other high school. And in fact, if you get down to the bottom 10, the average is 2/3 of the national average. If we're gonna look at a pipeline of diverse students, faculty, administrators, that whole group, we have got to tackle urban K-12 education.
So part of our focus on demographics and looking out 10 years and 20 years is also to look at diversity. And we see in particular that through our Commonwealth campuses that Penn State is becoming increasingly diverse. And in fact, you see very clearly that the composition of the student body is approaching more and more the diversity of the catchment areas that each one of these campuses. This is a really good sign. It is a very slow process that you can see literally evolving over 15 to 20 years. Staff also have a match. Faculty do not. And University Park is an exception. Part of University Park's diversity is because of the number of students from the Commonwealth campuses that are coming to finish at University Park. We have just finished the third 5-year plan as a framework for diversity for the institution. And in looking at these plans, I think we have the opportunity now to look at this more from the viewpoint of best practice, sharing the best practice, getting everybody on board, and then looking much more carefully at success rates. And the interesting thing about it is an institution, we've operated with this as a unit, as a college, as a campus, because we were trying to internalize this as part of the attitude of each one of our institutions. And I think we're at the stage of now moving towards something that's more comprehensive for the university. We do see a lot of diversity as kind of a wave going through the faculty, where the junior faculty ranks are becoming more diverse and the senior faculty ranks are sort of waiting for the individuals to grow. But to be truthful, an awful lot of that is also coming from international population of faculty. It's not yet a complete story the way I think that it should be. But it is something that we're working on very seriously, and probably we've had the most comprehensive look compared to how this state is changing than I've heard of.
So I'll be a little less sanguine. I think Pitt has a diversity problem. It's something we've identified from the very beginning, that we're less demographically diverse, less racially diverse than we want to be, and that by any comparison that we would set ourselves to be. And I think of particular current concern to me is we've actually lost diversity over time. At one time, Pitt faculty enjoyed a much higher representation from African Americans than they do today. It actually has eroded. Now we're seeing some of that recovery in the tenure track stream. Our student population has actually slipped in terms of its diversity, and I think this is actually a crisis, that this open mix of ideas and creativity that are so important to the lifeblood of a university, and the fact that these universities are magnets for the region, and Pennsylvania itself should seek to become more diverse as it grows. We have to attract people to come to this state because of the economic opportunity, and the universities will be beacons for that. Need to be beacons for that. They're going to play a key role. So I think there's no, at least I haven't discovered a secret sauce that makes this happen. I think it's got to be commitment, and it's got to be strategic. And I think it's really, there's a lot of opportunities here. There are, our growing reputation nationally gives us opportunities to recruit out of state. We can target and form relationships with high schools where we can get to know those students, and we're not just depending on who puts an application in at the front end. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, but it's something that we've decided we have to really focus on to make a difference.
And thank you all for your responses. Again, in the interest of time, we'll pick up this conversation in another forum and try to do some detailed work on it. This has been an issue that has been part of the state's reality for several decades. Part of mine for the time that I've been here in Harrisburg, both in the House and the Senate. And we've had good years and we've had bad years. If we're not bringing kids in through K through 12, then there is no pipeline reality for your universities, and consequently for teaching, administering, and what have you. And we should be competing, and we should draw faculty from other institutions from around the country. I'd like this to not be a problem nationally, but my first focus is here in the Commonwealth. But we want to continue this and hopefully use this window of opportunity where we're doing some reinvestment in our higher education institutions, in our higher education community, to try to tackle this issue that has been hovering, lurking, almost embedded in Pennsylvania's reality for far too many years and far too many decades. But I appreciate your interest from all four of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hughes, and thank all of you for your patience and participation today. It's been very valuable. Just some final questions. First, on budget requests in relation to budget recommendations. Something I haven't seen, I don't believe, in my time here, 21 years here. I might be missing something. But in terms of what it means financially in relation to expectations and communications in regards to tuition freezes, Penn State University request to the budget office was $245 million, an increase of 13.6%, 13.6 million or 5.9%. The recommendation to the General Assembly was $263.7 million, 49.6% $1.6 million, 23%. Temple's request to the budget office was $146.9 million, 7 million, 5%. Recommendation of the General Assembly was $155 million, an increase of $15.4 million, 11%. University of Pittsburgh's request was higher than what was recommended, and Lincoln's was higher than what was recommended. There's no common elements in this that I could see in regards to my knowledge of universities and what this means. The higher recommendations over requests and lower recommendations against requests across your institutions in relation to the budget office. Can you give me some of your thoughts regarding that and what it means to what we can expect on how you would respond, tuition freezes, whether those tuition freezes are tied to the higher recommendation above the request? That would be helpful in terms of what our expectations are.
Okay, well, I can just say from my viewpoint, of course, I don't think any of us dreamed about making a request which would follow the notion of restoring the cuts that we received. And so, so this wasn't something that we thought about as a request. And instead, we added up a whole series of things that were focused on helping us be a partner with the state to drive economic development. I believe that that the budget recommendation opens up all sorts of opportunities to focus on the needs of our students, not the least of which is access and affordability, which is one of Penn State's two highest priorities. At the requested amount, it is relatively easy for me to say, okay, I wouldn't raise tuition. I wouldn't recommend to my board that they raise tuition under these circumstances. We run lots of different scenarios, and of course, a lot of this just depends on, at the end of the day, what the outcomes are. And so the best I can say to you is that I'm incredibly serious. The things we want to focus on are our students and access and affordability. There's so much to do there other than think about tuition in terms of shortening the time to degree, shortening the total cost, making sure need-based students are more successful coming into the system, making sure transfer students aren't taking an extra half of a year to finish. These are an enormous number of ways where our retention rates go up, our four-year graduation rates go up, our six-year graduation rates go up, our student loan debt goes down, and the total cost of a degree goes down. And so, you know, my commitment is to focus on those two very high priorities. Incidentally, in the scenarios that we have been running, the institution has been looking on the order for $30 to $40 million in cuts so that we can do, you know, more innovative things. Our commitment to take those cuts out of our budget are there regardless of what the appropriation is, because we see what is presented to us in this session is an opportunity to return to a mode of much more aggressive innovation for our students. And so that's what I'm hoping to do.
The conversation happened, you made the request, budget office administration talked to you about, I understand what the request is. I guess this is more to Temple and Penn State. What would you do with an additional component of dollars if we provided you a recommendation above your request? Did that conversation happen in regards to specifics? The differential between the recommendation and the request?
I can answer for Eric. Certainly in terms of Temple, it did not. But the answer is we would hold down tuition. I mean, I'm absolutely aligned at the hip with Eric on what the focus of our priorities are. So going beyond our request, that simply allows us to
keep the tuition down.
Keep tuition down.
All right.
Pretty much the same situation here. There wasn't a detailed backdoor discussion. In fact, I find it interesting how much commonality there actually was, in spite of the fact that we weren't discussing this either. The approach was really the idea that there's not an entitlement to restore past levels of funding, but as a public-related institution, we have a public mission to support. And it clearly involves accessibility of higher education to Pennsylvania residents, and it includes helping to drive and shape this economy, and we pretty much all landed in a similar place. And I think that's why, you know, I'm reluctant to draw a line in the sand and say this one triggers no increase and this one, because I will probably just end up negotiating with myself. But the goal actually is one I think we all share. We are going to do everything we can to hold this tuition increase as low as possible and to do everything we can to maximize the economic returns of the university. And it's really in that spirit that we enter the budget season and look forward to working with everyone.
Okay, I know that the time is getting late here. Maybe it might be best just to ask for information to come after the hearing. There's a lot of conversation across state government, especially in regards to general operating budgets as it relates to benefit costs, retirement costs, ratios in state government. Right now, significantly higher than what is being sustained outside state government. But some of your institutions before us can probably benchmark that, because you don't have the costs associated with supporting significant unfunded debt in defined benefit plans. University of Pittsburgh, Temple University, Lincoln. Do you know what your benefit factors are as a component of salary? Can you produce that for us? Maybe it might be just best to ask for that, so we could see what that would be.
We can provide that, certainly.
Okay. One conversation that's going to happen over the next year that I know is significantly important to universities and something you were heavily engaged in 18 years ago was a discussion of Pennsylvania standards for purely public charities. It does have a direct effect on budgeting for universities, depending on how we set the standards. I would know that you would be heavily engaged in that conversation. Again, it's important that you are, because we want to make sure the standards we put in place or change in regards to things that have been in place for 18 years are appropriate for the current times. But without your direct engagement, that'll be very hard. Two other requests for information. It would be great if within our largest state-related universities, if it's possible to quantify the total amount of remedial education that may occur within your universities. Specifically, I guess the best way to put it is quantifying what cost could possibly be more attributed to the primary and secondary system that occurs within your universities. And one last item, how the differential between state and out-of-state tuition relates to your appropriation. What that subsidy is, quantified that subsidy in relation to the state appropriation, because I think that's the clearest indication of state relation, is that how much we're providing for that differential. Again, the time is late. I wanted to thank all of you. All of us, in relation to our constituencies and our work for Pennsylvania, I can say really clearly that we wouldn't know what Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, or Pennsylvania would be without your institutions and the tremendous value you provide our communities and our students. So thank you for all you do, and we look forward to working with you to finish our budgets. So thank you. Thank you.